Of all the places in Australia's north, Cape York Peninsula is where the Europeans came off worst in their mission to tame a new continent. It was as if the land itself was rejecting an unwanted transplant, and in many places the pioneers had to fight more than a hostile environment. They also faced a stubborn territorial defence by the original owners. One of the most tragic incidents of early settlement occurred on one of the most beautiful spots in the north. Lizard Island was first seen by Europeans when Captain Cook came ashore to use the hills as a lookout for a channel to escape from the deadly labyrinth of the northern Great Barrier Reef. Cook found his escape route, but 100 years later, there was no escape for the first white family to make a home on Lizard. All that remains of this early settlement are the remnants of a house built from island stone. Robert Watson, a Bêche de Mer fisherman, brought his wife Mary and their baby son Ferrier to live on Lizard in 1881. The story of what happened here comes from poignant entries in diaries kept by Mrs. Watson. While Robert was away fishing, Aborigines attacked in force, killing one of 2 Chinese servants in their first raid on the house. Mary Watson drove them back from the walls for 2 days with a rifle and revolver. But after the second servant was speared 7 times, she decided the battle was lost. It was on the 2nd of October, 1881, that Mrs. Watson, her baby, and her wounded Chinese servant abandoned their home and made their escape from here. Within a fortnight of leaving, all 3 were dead. Mary Watson, her 3-month-old baby Ferrier, and her servant R. Sam perished from thirst and exposure on a small, desolate island. The final entries in Mary Watson's diary read, "Not feeling at all well, no water, nearly dead with thirst." Ironically, when the bodies were found in the small tank, now a museum piece in North Queensland, they were submerged in rainwater that came too late to save their lives. The bodies were taken to Cooktown, the nearest settlement on the mainland, where the citizens unveiled a memorial to the courage of Mary Watson. The Lizard Island tragedy struck a responsive chord in the pioneers of the far north. Her story, in many ways, was their story, a struggle against a hostile environment that threatened their entire existence on a daily basis. Individual settlers, families, even entire communities had to face the possibility that they could be wiped out at any time. The very first Europeans to see this part of Australia decided that Cape York was less than promising. Dutch explorers saw the west coast and decided there was no potential at all. And later, on the eastern side, Captain James Cook almost came to a premature end on the reef. But the accident forced Cook to spend time ashore, and he could see potential in the north to match the promise he found in the south. It was in the far north that Cook made his longest stop anywhere in Australia. He and his crew spent 7 weeks camped here on this riverbank, making repairs to his ship, which had been holed on the Great Barrier Reef. For the next 100 years, the spot was virtually forgotten, until 1873, when the area that had become known as Cook's Landing once again became the focal point of a nation. The lure of gold turned Cook's Landing into Cooktown. People arrived so quickly, it was impossible to keep count. As many as 40,000 fortune hunters quickly built the biggest northern city in Australia. There were 65 licensed hotels and uncounted dozens of sly grog shops. There were just as many houses of ill repute, 2 newspapers, 20 eating houses, even a convent school and a bishop's palace. But in less than 30 years, this thriving city had decayed into an almost deserted shell. What remains are echoes of a former glory and a few magnificent buildings built on the gold of the 1870s. It all started with a man named James Venture Mulligan. A handwritten notice nailed up at a North Queensland mining warden's office was all it needed to start the last of the great Australian gold rushes. James Venture Mulligan was well remembered for his advice to wait until after the wet season before venturing into the jungle. He's even better remembered for not following the advice himself, ensuring his early arrival on the scene by pressing on to stake the richest claims for himself and his friends. Behind them, an assortment of ill-prepared fortune hunters flooded into the area with unseemly haste. Prospectors and traders, greedy men and visionaries passed through in an extraordinary stream, joined by thousands of pigtailed coolies from China. One of the greatest dangers faced by them all was the threat of attack by the local Aborigines, the Merkins, a notorious tribe of cannibals. The call of the black cockatoo was the most feared sound in the scrub. The Merkins used the cockatoo's screech as a war cry whenever they attacked.
Down like Merkins.
There were hundreds of cases of miners being killed and eaten along with their animals. The arrival of a gold-hungry horde quickly destroyed the Aboriginal fishing holes and drove off the wild game. Human flesh had always been part of the Merkins' diet, and they had no second thoughts at all about eating men instead of wallaby or fish. Reports from the time say the Chinese were considered the best eating because of their largely vegetarian diet. In one punitive raid on a black camp, half a dozen Chinese miners were found alive, hung in a tree from their pigtails, waiting for their turn to be clubbed, roasted and eaten. Even when the Palmer was past its best, news had not reached Asia, and the Chinese continued to arrive by the shipload. In Canton and Hong Kong, Cooktown's reputation had given Australia a new name, Sin Chin San, the new mountain of gold.
By 1877, the Chinese in Cooktown outnumbered the Europeans by 10 to 1. There were 18,000 of them living in an incredibly overcrowded Chinatown. There were 3 joss houses, like this reconstruction, for the religious, and the streets of Cooktown were said to reek of opium brought in by the Tong secret societies.
Although the Chinese were by far the largest single ethnic group, according to historical records from Cooktown, they didn't discover much gold, or at least they didn't declare much to the customs office. Unofficially, they found at least as much as the Europeans, and probably much more. Vast fortunes were concealed and smuggled back to China, some of it hidden among the remains of men sent home for burial. Cooktown saw 1 million ounces of gold in the first 6 years, and that's only the amount declared to the taxman. Nobody knows how much was undeclared and smuggled out past the few overworked customs men. At the height of the rush, the Palmer River literally flowed with gold. A Mr. Jessup worked an area about the size of a tabletop. Now in 2 days, he walked away with 600 ounces. At today's prices, that's around $360,000 worth. Everyone thought it would never end. Even in the 10th year of the rush, the Palmer gave up 40 tons of gold, and fortunes were still being made up to the turn of the century. There was gold for everyone. In places they didn't even have to pan for it. It was simply there for the taking, washed into crevices or creases in rocky creek beds. There was so much that there was even a fashion for beating gold into horseshoes that covered the entire hoof. Publicans, prostitutes, professionals and shopkeepers became far richer than the miners. A doctor once made the equivalent of $22,000 for patching up the wounded after a 3-day battle between 2 Chinese groups. But finally, the gold petered out, and in the space of a few years, Cooktown was all but deserted. gold rush days still persists along the legendary River of Gold. And you can't help feeling that diggers of 100 years ago must have missed a few fortunes that are still lying around on the banks of the Palmer. Louis Comsick first came here to hunt crocodiles. After shooting 14,000 crocs and having his back broken by a giant sawfish, he decided enough was enough, and he settled down here at the Palmer River. All around us, we know there's still gold. The question is, how much?
Doesn't matter where you go, you can go grab the dish and go down there, you find a colour. You wouldn't make a strike fortune maybe, but you find a colour, doesn't matter where you go, you know.
Do they know how much longer it will last? It's been going over 100 years now.
Well, that's the surface. Nobody knows what's underneath the slides, and that I think that some companies start drilling underneath now. Start putting that drills down, and I think there's good opportunity underneath, you know.
So there could still be another fortune to be made from the Palmer River.
Let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Louis found at least enough to make a few pieces of appropriate jewellery. And there's more proof of the gold nearby, where he keeps a protective eye on an old man who still knows the Palmer as a river of dreams.
Hang on, Bob.
Hello, I thought it might come up a storm. I thought I'd better get that gear out of the creek.
Well, you're cleaning a fortune, huh?
Fortune might buy me a nice print.
Hang on.
Good.
I want you to meet nice people from Brisbane, man.
I'm Dean. Hello, Bob.
How did it, Dean?
How are you? Haven't caught you at a bad time, have we?
No, good time. I've just finished work.
Bob Hyland is an Australian of the old style, a bush gentleman who lives by the principles of hard work and self-reliance.
Well, I don't work a long day. I can't. I'm 76 and I've had open heart surgery.
Oh, really?
And I'm still swinging the pick and shovel and doing heavy work. Louis will tell you.
It seems nothing will keep Bob away from the gold. That's what we came to see. But first, there's compulsory bush hospitality.
Got the billy boiling now and I've got the tea made. You come in and have a cup of tea.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Love one. Love one. Love one.
You do all your cooking out here?
Yes. Camp oven and I make bread, make my own bread.
Home is a rough bush camp, not even weatherproof. But in the remote tropics, that's less important than making use of whatever comes to hand.
I'm a bush carpenter. All I need is an axe and a hammer and a screwdriver and if I haven't got a pair of snips, a tin opener.
Oh, beautiful, mate. Blessed you decided black stump, huh?
Bob's lifestyle and his devotion to prospecting is in the blood. He learnt his bushcraft and mining from his father, who learnt his skills in the original gold rushes.
A little bit of iron.
Bob finds a few specks of the precious metal every time he works the river. Eventually it builds into a slurry of golden dust, which he takes away and banks in the city.
I've never any ambition to have a lot of gold, you know. I like working gold and it's nice to find something worthwhile, but I realise that now age is against me. All I'll probably ever do now is what we call fossicking. Round an old gold field and just pick up what I can where other blokes might reckon it's not good enough to work, and it suits me. The days when I could get up into the rough country, they'd be past. I can't do that anymore.
Bob Hyland and his methods are a living slice of history. There's not much different here from the way it was in the 1870s.
The gold remains.
Those days of the rush are also being brought to life in another way at the Palmer River Roadhouse. Louis Comsick has commissioned artist James Baines to paint a mural for the Roadhouse to go with his collection of goldfield relics.
How you going, Jane?
G'day, Louis.
How things?
Oh, very well, mate. Very well.
You're happy today,
Yeah,
eh?
happy today. Yeah. Paintbrush in hand. We're away.
That's what good. Few rum in the evening, eh?
Louis himself features in the painting, but most of it's being devoted to the Great Rush.
So one, we had Fred Warner, who actually found gold in the hand party. Then the second one, we've got the rush, which came with Mulligan. Then once the rush came, then the official party coming from here at Cooktown, right? This is Cooktown, and they were attacked by 300 Aborigines, like full-on attack, right? And they just blew them away with Snyders, these big rifles, and put holes in them. So when the Aborigines fell down, they just propped them up, but they didn't know what was happening, see? So they stuffed grass in the holes, because that's what they used to do when they were speared, and they'd stand them up and they'd fall down again.
James hasn't missed a thing, like the grisly death of a Chinese miner at the hands of a Merkin tribe of cannibals.
Cut him up. What they did was cut him up and take him away. and then so they could all carry a piece each, because the whites were in chasing them. So they disemboweled him and chopped him up with his own spade for dinner. Farmer